Minutes for everyone to be there, Laurie.
Sure. Yeah. Just early welcome to those of you who are early. So great to see everybody here. And yeah, we should be starting in about 2 minutes. So make yourself comfortable. Yes, feel free to use the chat to say hello. And by the way, throughout the whole presentation, if you have questions, you're welcome to write them into the chat. We'll be taking a look at them and selecting from that list of questions during the Q&A. Again, if you're just joining us, we're going to start in about a minute. So welcome. Thanks for joining. Feel free to say hi in the chat. And also, as I just said, to ask any questions for any of the three speakers or for Hubbers group in general. All right, we will be starting in just a minute. And Benjamin, I have 2 o'clock. Shall we go?
Okay, the show can start.
All right. So welcome everyone to this Impact Branding webinar. We're very pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. We have 3 wonderful speakers and a great topic, which is about social welfare and sustainability case studies across continents. So we have expert speakers who are located in Shanghai, in Kuala Lumpur, and in Geneva. So in that way, we're representing big parts of the world. I wanted to introduce myself first. My name is Laurie Ann Underwood, and I am a senior professor of practice at a business school located in Paris called IESEG. I'm also the head of the marketing management major there. And I have a lot of history in China, and I'm pleased to be a regular research contributor to the SEABS ESG white paper. So I try to keep my foot still in Shanghai. And why I'm passionate about the theme of this webinar is I really love this quote from Nelson Mandela. Maybe some of you know it, but I think it's true, and I use it every time I teach a class, and indeed I think it relates to this webinar. That's the quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world." And our hope with this webinar is that you learn things from the speakers that you can apply in your own jobs, in your own future jobs, in your own projects, that will indeed help us to promote the concept of impact branding and let it help with social and sustainability issues. So I'm going to first turn over to the founder of Hubbers to let him introduce himself and to tell you all a little bit about this platform. And then we'll jump right into the key speakers.
Thanks very much, Laurie, for the great introduction. Thanks very much for all my friends that joined today. I see quite a lot of people from all around the world. So I want to give you a very short introduction about myself and what is Hubbers about for the one that doesn't know for the moment. I have been spending basically 20 years plus of my life in Asia, making a lot of product development for a lot of European companies, American companies. And at a certain time, through, let's say, a personal hurdle, it came to my mind that the life was, I was growing up, but I was not doing something very important for the world. And having two kids, I decided that I will do product developments that are aligned to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So it's how Hubbers came, because during that time, I got a lot of opportunities to help creators in sustainable products. So and we decided that for them, we could try to create community. So that's what we did in Asia, in Shanghai first. Then we started with Shenzhen, and then we expand to other countries in Asia and in Europe. And we slowly decided to build up some tools, because we also believe that technology is part of the future. So we start building tools for our community of creators, of experts on the cycle of product development, and of the contributors. So I'm very happy to have great speakers. Also Max, who has been helping us quite a lot on branding, because when we talk about branding, I want to give him a special thanks, because as you can see me on the t-shirt, the first logo and was not very much what we wanted to convey, but Max will tell you more about that. Thank you, Laurie, for moderating this great event.
It's my pleasure, Benjamin. So let's jump into the expert speakers. We're going to start in Shanghai with Rich Brubaker. Richard, I'll let you introduce yourself and why you're passionate about this topic, and then jump into the discussion. Rich is going to start out on a higher level, talking about some trends in terms of consumers and their support or not of sustainability and social welfare purpose.
All right, thanks, Laurie. Thanks, Ben. So very quickly, I have 7 minutes, so I'm going to cover a few kind of key points of what I've been seeing. As you'll see here, I have a number of titles and I sit on a number of boards, but I've, broad stroke, been sitting in China for the better part of the last 22 years. I'm the founder of several charities. I have a consulting agency focused on sustainability for brands, and I also have a platform focused on mission-driven entrepreneurs. So basically, the mindset tool set of taking a challenge that's out your back door and putting some screen to it. So, hopefully building scale, hopefully turning the tide on some of these issues that we face. And I'll be talking about a few of those this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you are in the world, and kind of what brands are doing to engage their consumers, engage their stakeholders. Why I'm passionate about it. I've been at this a long time. It is my mission. I have a 12-year-old son, but more than that, I've just started to realize that we have a lot of work to do and we can do it. And so I'm really passionate about engaging people, engaging organizations, really what I call driving the nail through the wall. So with that, we'll go to the next slide, Ben. All right, so the next three pictures, basically, I don't really worry about what's wrong with the world. I'm not here to tell you what's wrong with the world. I think everyone here can look out the window and they can see something in their community, their city, their country, or at the global level that they're concerned with. And for some, it might be air pollution. For others, it might be plastic in the ocean. For someone in South America, it might be heat waves that are brought on by soy plantations, brought on by, the food system itself. Really agnostic to that, but let's just agree that there are challenges to be faced and that there's something that we can do. Now, in the context of this conversation, all I'm going to talk about is like, how do consumers, or if you're a brand or an entrepreneur trying to engage on these issues of sustainability, how do you capture an audience? Because I think we've talked and heard a lot about the fact that everyone's willing to spend more. And there was a recent study that showed that something like 85% of the world, based on 130,000 surveys, was willing to spend 1% of their gross income. But as I think many of us would agree, saying that is different than doing that. And so I want to talk about the three core segments. So the first one that I have found, like, if you want to actually convert people, I think you really have to understand who they are, what they're attracted to, what are they concerned with, and what are they going to spend money against. And for me, the first one, bar none, about spending for the environment, which is linked to product quality, which is linked to their direct health, is going to be young families. And that's because once you have a child, you kind of view the world as everything's trying to kill that child, and it's my job to protect it. So you'll spend more for cleaner food. You'll spend more for organic cotton. You'll spend more for safety. You'll spend more for environmental interiors. Like, you'll just do a lot. And no matter how rich or poor you'll be, you will reallocate budget against that. So you will actually change your consumer habits around that. The next group is going to be really conscious consumers. And I would argue that this is the group since probably 2009, around the COP15 in Copenhagen, the COP agreements, where consciousness of global warming, of the environment, that was a really big peak for climate change. But if you're in South Asia or Southeast, from anywhere 2008 to 2014 in China, the last years in India and Indonesia have been facing it, they see it. And so this is really raising a lot of citizen and consumers consciously to think about what is it that they're buying and how are they either a part of the problem or how can they buy things that are actually part of the solution. And the last one is going to be really the health and wellness group. Now, these three groups, again, easy to, I mean, I can show you about 15 different groups. I'm just going to focus on these three because these are the three that I think in a down economy, in an up economy, in an uncertain economy, they tend to hold true no matter what. Health and wellness one, and this is everything from your yoga instructor to someone who's been working out, someone who's going for the marathon, triathlon, anything that is on them or in them, cosmetics, medicine, food, clothing. They will spend more because they're already spending so much time and energy trying to be fit and healthy. They're not going to put a bunch of garbage into their body. They're going to look for organic. They're going to look for plant-based. They're going to look for fair trade. They're going to look for things that reflect their values. And also those communities tend to be very tight. Now, I have a few bullet points here. And if you would like these slides later, reach out to me. My contact information is below. But again, just go ahead and hit all three, Ben. It's all right. What we see is everyone says in the two pie charts here that they are interested in buying sustainability. But if you look at and I'm sorry that these are kind of small, but basically the bar on the far left here basically says, yes, I'm willing to spend and I know how to. And the next three are basically, yes, I'm willing to spend, but I have no idea. And one of them is like, I don't know where to find it. I don't know what to trust. I don't know which brands to pick. And basically there's just a lot of confusion about what these products are and how they can benefit. Next slide. So basically I have 5 steps conversion. Slow down, Ben. You're killing me. All right. The first one is know your consumer. Like really spend some time outside talking to the individuals, the communities that you are trying to help. I mean, your product should help them. It can't just be good for the world. I mean, there are markets around that, like the health and wellness group. They'll spend a little bit more for that when they have extra money. But when you can solve a problem for them and you know that problem, that's the starting point. Next. The next one is like solve a real problem. I put the Starbucks cup up here because, if you remember about 4 or 5 years ago, we had that plastic straw in the turtle moment where everyone's like, oh my God, we got to get rid of straws. And Starbucks a week later is like, we have an answer. We have a new lid. And 2 days later, we all realized that there's more plastic in that lid than in straws, and that you still put a straw in the lid didn't solve a real problem. But it sounded great, right? Like we all commended Starbucks for about 48 hours. And that's the reality. Like you need to solve a real problem. Once you know the consumer, you know what problems they face, help them solve that problem. Next. The third thing is really understand what is their purchase path? How do they get information to make the purchase? If you're in the health and wellness community, it's probably not from magazine advertisements or TV. It's probably from the yoga instructor. Or if you're talking to young families, it's probably moms directly. Like, have you tried this product? You should try this product. And then everyone buys it. Next. And then in that sense, you really need to be focused on, instead of like just selling and marketing and click-through rates, build real communities, build brand champions that reflect those individuals who would reflect within those consumers. So if it's moms, it's moms. If it's yoga instructors, yoga instructors. But it has to reflect them. It's not going to be celebrity driven. Like everyone kind of makes fun of celebrities now because they're all co-opting a thing. But if you're in your community, you're in your city, and you know these people and they believe in your product, those are the groups that you need to be targeting. Next. And finally, I think is be patient. I think I've worked with brands who wanted $20 million in sales in the first year, 60 million in the first year. You're like, but this is a sustainable product. You should take your time. If you're going to be building community and you're going to be building something for the long term that really changes habits, changes patterns, changes the world, you can't do that overnight. If you could, it would have been done already. And that's why I think a lot of times brands and entrepreneurs are really rushing, and they're missing the first 3 steps. They lose track of their consumer. They stop solving a real problem. They really have no idea where anyone buys anything. They're just spending a lot of marketing, and therefore the products you see really cycle around a lot. And that leads into a lot of greenwashing, which leads me to my last point. Don't lie, ever. Go ahead and finish it, Ben. All right. So I worked with one of the largest retailers in the world on textile apparel, and it's not the one that you can kind of clearly identify left here with their recycling bin. And we were looking at, if you engage consumers in recycling of textiles, of shoes, of athletic apparel, whatever it may be, consumers want to actively participate in that. But this, on the right side, this was actually where one brand that I found, very prominent brand, was actually recycling their stuff. And most consumers, if they knew that that's where it was going, they would absolutely revolt. They would look at that and go, that is not better for the world. And so you cannot lie, you cannot hide, you cannot really greenwash very long. At the end of the day, you have to understand the problem, and then you have to really build a community that's built on trust. And as long as you get that trust, you have an opportunity to really grow through the community, grow through the product category, and hope solve some real problems. And I think my next slide is my last one.
Thank you.
Ben fell. There we go. So if you'd like to learn more, feel free to contact me. That's my WhatsApp at the bottom. All my links there, my email. And if you're interested in seeing a couple podcasts, the left side is entrepreneurs, and that's the one that's in blue. You can scan that. It'll take you to the YouTube channel. If you're interested in looking at government officials or academics, nonprofits, corporate sustainability people, you want to learn from them, then scan the one on the right that's got the red box. And again, that'll take you to my YouTube page. And I have about 150, I have about 100 on each right now. And I'm building every week, you'll see a new one. And my goal really is just to kind of inspire and empower you to make better decisions, get a little bit further in your career, and hopefully we can start saving or, like solving problems together. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, Lori, for the extra time. I hand it over.
Thank you, Richard. And I just want to emphasize that Richard is really super well connected in this industry and a wealth of information and knowledge. I've interviewed him many times for different papers, and I've known him for years, and just has all of my respect. So what we're going to do is let each of the speakers have their 8 or so minutes to explain their favorite key points. Then I'll ask a few follow-up questions to each one. And after that, we have time for questions from the audience. So people listening, please, as you think of a question, whether it's for a specific speaker or just for the whole panel, please type them in, and we'll leave time at the end. We're definitely going to wrap up like 1 hour from now, but there's plenty of time for you to type in the questions that are coming to mind. So we're next going to turn to Max. And Max, I'll let you introduce yourself with your first slide and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and what makes you passionate about this topic. And then you'll have time to share your favorite case studies.
Thank you so much, Lori, and hi to everyone. Whenever you are in any parts in the world, saying hi here from Malaysia. I also want to wish those celebrating Chinese New Year, which is right now, 恭喜恭喜. Well, I definitely learned something from Richard earlier on, and such a man that definitely, for me, myself, was just listening, paying attention in the area of sustainability, creating impacts. And that is also an area that I have been really passionate about in creating impacts through my expertise, which is design. Personally, I'm actually started as a designer, graphic design, and up to today, even though I have been in the industry for a decade and more right now, I'm still passionately designing, crafting brand logos for my clients, which later on you'll see 1 or 2 case studies from that. So I founded a company called Be Part Of. In short, it's called BPO. And a few other involvement that I'm in right now, especially in this year, I do have opportunity to work with government links companies like Martrade as their knowledge partners in creating pipelines to best serve SMEs here in the regions. Hopefully through that scale, we'll be able to bring awareness to the SMEs, entrepreneurs and business leaders, the awareness of what it means to tweak their business brand's goal towards of those matters more beyond just profit making. And so myself, I'm also a design thinking coach. If those of you who know, design thinking is simply a user-centered approach to problem solving. So I have helped during the pandemics many entrepreneurs and in different platforms just simply to be able to find the footings, handles in reviving their businesses in the times of suffering. So, and even right now, we are being practitioners in the design thinking space. A lot of things that we do, even later on, as I'm sharing the case studies, it's very much driven by the design thinking methodologies. Well, why am I passionate about this webinar and things that I do through brand and design? Simply because this is a quote that I put up. Before that, just go back to the earlier slide. Simply these few words: the world is better when brand matters. And I think that says a lot about being someone involved in brand building, designing, setting strategies, designing in many aspects. It's always about creating brand, not just about making brand looks good, but it's about pointing those brand towards of good directions where it plays a part in creating impact to the world. So I do believe that you and I here, and even for our next generation to come, we plays a key part, vital part, as what Richard mentioned earlier on, in creating that impact together. Yeah. So next slide, and it will just be some of the involvement that I'm in. So being a designer, and I also deliver keynotes to my clients, particularly in the design thinking space and crafting brand visual logos. And those you see here on the screens, I personally crafted those brand logo carefully. Beyond just creating another symbol for companies, we always believe it should be the symbol of change for the organizations. Yeah. So next slide, very quickly here. It's simply 3 big processes as part of Be Part Of. We crafted this, and being the creator for what I call the brand DEI, it's basically 3 different stages in terms of our brand building, in ensuring we move business forward impactfully. Number 1 is talk about brand direction. In the space of brand direction is basically before moving into screens, anything and executions, we want to ensure brands are defined in the positionings, in their purpose, in terms of even their personality. We do agree that brand is like a person. Then if we were to get to know this person as clear as possible, we will be able to set a certain direction, a future direction. Just as everyone here, we do have a purpose or direction to move forward. That goes the same with brand. So once the direction is set, we then move into brand expression. Brand expression is just like anything that visually you can see, you can experience, you can feel, you can even touch. For in our case here, brand expression has to do with brand visual, namely on creating brand logos that speaks the language or speaks the message of the early on brand directions of what has been defined. Brand expression also encompass in the areas how the wordings, the choice of words, the tone and manner, if it were to present it to the audience. And nevertheless, we also touch on a brand impression, which a lot about cultural buildings. In these segments, we crafted brand values for clients together with them, and with the goal of turning those values into culture. And that is very vital in that. And the next part, it is, you can see here, the 3 circles here. In all that we do, when it comes to sustainability, impact-driven future, it's always about beyond profit-driven. It has to have a people impact, planet impact, besides that profit impact aspect. So this is how we maneuver through designing brands. I'm just going to quickly share 1 or 2 case studies, and this is the key one, which we completed about close to 2 years ago. It's basically a hold on, just go back first, the earlier slide. Basically, this is, in a nutshell, it's a public listed company who, they are property developers here in Malaysia, in the city called Melaka. They have been around for 25 years, and they should have certain names in the market. But ironically, the locals don't even know their existence. Consider they have been around for many years, and they build good quality homes. And the director, the business leader, came to us with the challenge that it faces. As a new public listed company, there is a gap on people progression, means people growth. Their mentality is still very much backtracked, just prior before they went public listed. So that seems to be a gap on how we might use design and brands to bridge that gap. So the next slide explain, we take into the consideration of brand direction, expression, impressions. Don't worry about if you can't see it clearly. I believe that the team will send this to you as well. So in the brand direction, we look into setting brand positioning of the brands and even personality. Personality simply means, are you more of a feminine brands or the masculine kind of brands, and which one of it, or you are more of an industrial over naturals? So all these things we take into consideration designing for their future brands. And we did certain brand audits for the brand and crafting brand purpose in that brand direction segment. So brand expression are those you see more on the visual settings. They have the old logos, and now the question is, how does these new symbols represent something of those values that we have set for them? So I personally crafted this brand logo for the clients and even put an icon that has a name. We call it 意识 in Mandarin, and it simply means meaning and awareness. So this 3 stripe that you see on the screen is basically the simplified icon for the entire brand name. So even the name, we help them to simplify to become Teladan. Teladan, you may not find it in English. It's in the Bahasa, Malay language, simply means role model. So we maintain that and make it not just as a name, but a terms we call the internal employees as Teladan. They are the role models, the fine example in the corporate cell. So we have set values, designing brand billboards for them, even a website that we involve in crafting those brand direction visuals. Yeah. So these are brand direction and brand expression. And we also move into one area which is called the brand impressions. Yeah. The next slide explain that. Oops, sorry, I think I missed that slide. But never mind. Brand impression simply is about building culture within an organizations. So early on, as I mentioned, how that we are able to put values in brands that be able to live out those values and turn it into culture. So you see on the bottom right here, there's a word called excellence, enrichment, empowerment. This is just beyond just a mere words, but it has become values that embedded into the employees of how they present those excellence works and enriching people's life and even empowering the community towards a sustainable future. So this is how they build that values. So last part, we definitely always look at impact. Now this is the next slide. These are some of the snapshots that you see is that in the news, even in the press as well, whether it's in social media too. One of the things during their brand launch, I was there as well. They initiate a project to plant 100 trees in the local schools. Yeah, you have to know, being a property developer, they are mostly in the business of chopping more trees, put it in negative ways. They chop more trees to build more houses. But for them, one area is they can tackle is climate change. So to combat that big challenge, one of the things they do is basically putting efforts to plant more trees. So they did that. In fact, after that brand launch, they planted about 160 plus trees in the local schools. And they even become the first brands in the city of Malacca, release or launch their first ever solar powered homes, which is hardly you will find that in the property development project in a city like Malacca, but they are being the first one. Just right after the branding exercise, and even through people, the people impact. We look from the perspective of how they begin of team building, which is for the longest time they don't have that elements, but they come together, building strong teams, fostering the cultivate internal talents, and you'll be surprised as well. They even conduct activity for construction workers, just to be able to build relationship with them. Yeah, more than just the internal team. So these are impacts that we see beyond just a profit impact. In fact, they have been growing in their profit side, but they grow in the people impact as well as the planet impact aspect. Yeah, so even they launched a new building on the top right. You see that is the green buildings, their HQ headquarters in Malacca, the city of Malacca. Yeah, so these are impacts that from this brand called Teladan. Next one, quickly, I'm just going to showcase, nevertheless, a Harbour's brand. And I count it a privilege, and years ago, we were able to get to know bands and we were able to jump on this. I think simply because I see that there is a big gap of the heartbeat of the founders, Benjamin, and towards the thing he is trying to do, which is co-creating a better tomorrow, co-creating something. We back then, we don't even have this tagline called co-create a better tomorrow. We proposed it because we went through the process of design thinking, learning the background the potential, the pinpoints, gaps, and we imagine the possibilities of what this brand can potentially reach more people through the platforms given. Hence, we sit down in the drawing boards. We're trying to imagine, this is where a better tomorrow take flight. You can ask ourselves, so that you can see on the image of flights, and then there's part of the green icons that as if it's like a flight icon. It's not just another triangle. So that triangle becomes a brand identity. Hopefully, when people look at it triangle, that represents something of our individually. We are taking flights in co-creating a better tomorrow. So this is a simple case, and it's a very meaningful one, even to myself, being able to play a part in this. Being someone who share this with you, I think it's tremendously a tremendous encouragement to myself as well. Yeah. So these are two case studies I like to share with you. I wish I have more time to share more with you, but do reach out to me. And on the last slide here, the last slide. Beside the contact, you can scan on this QR to reach out to me personally on my e-cards. And I do want to offer something. I felt since you have taken time to join this webinar, and I want to offer our brand scorecard exercise to those of you online here as complimentary. In fact, if you sign out here, if you go to the link and you being the top 30, I probably will be personally walk through the brand audit with you as well as a complimentary. So do click the link, and hopefully this is something helpful for you in creating impact-driven brands. Yeah. So let's get connected through different platforms, be it on LinkedIn, and follow us in LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Max. That was really informative and nice case study, and also thanks for highlighting a little bit Hubbers and how you worked with Hubbers to help them craft their brand around their social purpose. Let's jump to Alistair, who has some other different case studies, which are also based on the concept of social purpose. And then again, I'll be asking a few follow-up questions, but those in the audience, if you have a question, please type them in. It can be a question for a specific speaker or for the whole panel together. All right, Alistair, go ahead and introduce yourself and why this topic is important to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for having me, Benjamin and Lorianne. It's great to be with you. You might guess from the picture there that I'm somewhere in Europe, maybe in the Alps. And if you guessed Switzerland, then you would have guessed right. That's just from a couple of weeks ago in the Swiss Alps with my wife. I've been married 10 years, have a couple of kids, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, based in Geneva. And I work for an organization called Economics of Neutrality, where I'm a senior director for business transformation and learning. And our purpose really is to help other corporations put their purpose into practice. And this work has originated with the large multinational corporation called Mars Incorporated, where you will know them less for their group brand, but more for their actual brands, like M&M's and Twix, Mars bars, Skittles, Double Mint, but also their products in the pet care space, like Pedigree, Sheba, Whiskas, Royal Canin. So a huge global business. And this work around economics of neutrality started over 11 years ago, where the family, the Mars family, asked a team of internal researchers what the right level of profit for the corporation should be. And that leads me to this quote at the bottom, which was said by King Solomon 3,000 years ago: "One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty." And the reason why I put this quote there is because this chimes massively with that question. This is a family that own a $40 billion revenue company a year. And their question is, what's the right level of profit? And I think there's something profound about asking ourselves, what is enough? Because the answer to that in our global economy has always been never enough, always a bit more. And this quote from King Solomon suggests that actually, maybe there is something enough, that actually you can give freely but still have more than enough, and even gain more, and yet you can withhold and still feel like you lack. And actually there isn't this necessary linear relationship between money and more money. And the more I keep and accumulate, the happier I'll be and the more I'll have. And I think the more that we can be brave and courageous in putting question marks rather than full stops or exclamation marks behind that kind of thinking in our global economy, the more it will unlock some creative and innovative solutions around this purpose space. And Ben, you can go to the next slide. So now we are a totally independent organization. The Mars family said, hey, you know, this is great thinking in answering this question, what's the right level of profit? I guess everyone is saying, so what is the right level of profit? I'm not going to answer that question right now. You'll have to contact me later and we can talk about what the right level of profit really is. But it came to this point where actually, unless we begun to talk to as many businesses and companies all around the world trying to do this type of work, we would never really get a broadly applicable model. And so what we've been trying to do is develop what I'd call a management model for managing not for more profit or to maximize profit, but to manage for the right level of profit. And I would say that this is a new way of seeing business and a new way of doing business. And I really want to emphasize that it's both and. It's both a new way of seeing and a new way of doing. And I say that because if we only do a different way of business and we don't challenge some of the core assumptions, I think we end up in the more peripheral types of activities around the fringes of our business where we try and do a little less bad. But if we also include the seeing bit, we actually ask ourselves, well, what is the relationship of my business with society? How do I see the role of my business in its relationships with other stakeholders? How do I see the role of profit? How do I see the type of value that I create? And we do that with business. So if we ask ourselves what we see at the role or purpose of our company to be, it ought to change how we do business. Okay, so we need to do these two things together. If you could go to the next slide, Ben. So we really think it starts from this place. This is about a new way of seeing business, whether it's assumed and like sort of unconscious or whether it's conscious. Most of us build our businesses or think of our roles where our companies are at the center of the system. So let's just take a classic ESG word like materiality. That word is defined by what are the non-financial topics that are financially material to me? Who's at the center of that definition? The company. What lens are they seeing that through? Financial lens only. Non-financial topics that are financially material to my corporation. Nothing wrong with that. But what we would argue is that leaves all of the power of purpose on the table because it's rooted in the status quo of your business. What are my products that I sell? What are the services that I offer? Who are my current stakeholders? How do I do less bad to them? It's like you're asking for innovation, but you're talking to the same people and asking the same version of the same question to them again, and then thinking you'll get a different answer. And we're beyond that moment in time in the way that our progress toward the SDGs are going. So we need what we call this Copernican revolution. And if you know your history, so fast forward from King Solomon 3,000 years ago to 1,500 years forward, and we get to Copernicus. And if you know your history, you know that there was a long period of time where we believed that the Earth was at the center of the solar system and that everything orbited around us. And then this guy called Copernicus comes along and says, no, actually, the sun's at the center. And guess what? There was the church that actually said, you're a heretic. This isn't the way that the world is organized. But it was this feeling of being decentered was profound. But I think we're in a similar moment, where we need a Copernican kind of revolution within the way that businesses conceive of their role in society and the type of value that they create, so that they become less company-centric and more purpose-centric. So this is the big transition that we feel we need. And actually, if you can look at your brand, if you can look at your business unit through a decentered lens, where actually we don't ask what are the things that are material to me, but we flip that and say, what are the meaningful challenges in the world that my business is material to? Okay, then you've gone through a decentering process. And I'll give you a quick example of work that we've done with a large national bank in the UK. You can go to the next slide. Okay. So our work tends to begin as a strategy entry point, and then it flows into kind of how you might do some of the branding, the KPI setting, the culture pieces, what all of that means. But the reality is that all purpose statements aren't born equal, right? They're not all equally good. I'm sorry. We can't all say, well done. Your purpose statement is as good as everyone else's. It's not. So what we've done is say, it's not because we want to make a value judgment of what's good and what's bad. Okay. You know, saving children is more righteous than saving elderly. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that some purpose statements are more conducive to certain types of processes and outcomes, depending on what you want to drive. So when it comes to driving purpose as strategy, we are absolutely adamant that articulating your purpose as a meaningful challenge sets you up best for success in applying that and making sure that it's not greenwashing, purpose washing, pink washing, whatever kind of washing. Or more profoundly, it doesn't set you up for kind of falling into the gap of talking about purpose but not doing purpose. So we did a lot of work where we just pulled together as many purpose statements as we could, and we said ultimately there's just 3 archetypes. It's not rocket science. You know, there's the purpose statements that usually describe what a company has always done in the most kind of exciting way. So here, to provide branded products of superior quality, you may recognize that as P&G's kind of purpose statement. Nothing wrong with that. It's saying to the world what they do. That's an absolutely legitimate role for a purpose statement. Our question is that a way of understanding your role in society, in your ecosystem, that's going to set you up to do purpose really well? And our answer to that would be no, you can do better. And then the other type we saw was values, which is very popular, particularly with kind of younger tech companies. So this one is from Belong Anywhere. You'll recognize as Airbnb's purpose statement. Nothing wrong with that. You're telling the world what it means to be part of your company, what you might expect when you interact with us, all good things. And I would say that that leads you down a path of purpose where you're asking a lot of things about employee well-being and the journey more internally. Again, nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking to external impact, how can our purpose take us to new places, to combining this kind of complicated relationship with purpose and profit, and maybe unwinding that and discovering that, then you need to do one more, you need to go for a different type of purpose. You need to go for the meaningful challenge piece. And that's because there are 2 core criteria to that you are clear on, you're clear that the benefit of you solving that problem is for someone else other than yourself, primarily. And second, that you can be specific enough that it's measurable, because you're going to need to hold yourself accountable to that. So words like thriving, empowering, all very good words, but just don't fall into the trap of letting that hide what you mean, right? What do you really mean by empowering? Do you mean empowering when it comes to decision making? Do you mean empowering through income? Do you mean empowering through mental health or physical health? What do you mean by empowering? So we want to get to that level of detail. So next slide. Very quickly, if you don't believe me that when you get to the, and Richard mentioned this quite clearly, the solving the problem piece is absolutely key, right? This is where the value of the impact and purpose work is. And if you don't get to a clear articulation of what you're solving and for whom, then you're unlikely to kind of make the equation work, and it becomes a cost center and energy draining, and you might get accused of greenwashing. But if you can really get to this kind of, what are we solving? And this is research by the Edelman Trust Barometer. So it's a global poll, highly reliable. And it's just looking at the multiplier effect for brands that can clearly articulate that they're attempting to solve a global challenge. I deliberately have the business case buried somewhere in the deck, but I regret that the business case is relevant. So there it is. Next slide. So here's the work that we did with the bank. They started with, they're a brilliant bank. They had lots of, foundation-led projects. They were doing plenty of things in the community. And they had this language of financial capability, which to them basically meant, how do we take our vulnerable customers and tell them how to calculate an interest rate, or what APR means, or how to read their current account statement, or how to save better? How do we impart this kind of knowledge? And I would say that's a position that they haven't seen again their business in a new light. They haven't gone through the Copernican revolution. This is very much a business that still has itself at the center. And so we took them on the journey to, well, what does it look like to be purpose-centric? So that language of financial capability was like, I get why a bank is interested in your knowledge and your financial literacy and your credit score. But the average human on the street doesn't know what their credit score is off the top of their head. Okay, the average person on the street isn't calculating APR. But they are saying that money is a source of stress in my life. That actually when I wake up in the morning, I'm worried about the state of my bank account. When I go to sleep at night, I'm worrying how I'm going to pay a bill. That's what people really worry about. And so we said you need to broaden your understanding of less about what you can do as a bank and more about the nature, the texture of the problem that you're seeking to solve. And that's more like financial well-being and less like financial capability. And so we're saying financial well-being is about knowledge and literacy, yes, but it's about resilience, it's about inclusion in financial services, and really importantly, it's about mental health. How do you actually feel about your finances? Is it the main obstacle to you enjoying your life, to achieving your dreams? If so, that's a huge drain. Next slide. So we went on this journey to say, what would the real meaningful challenge be? And so this is where we landed. Their meaningful challenge is to improve the financial well-being of the UK. They tried to say if they're our customers, and we said, no, you're decentered. Purpose is at the center. It's not just about your customers. Okay, let's make it about the UK. And those are just some stats that we have. We can go to the next slide. And so this is just a taste of what it would mean for a company to really become purpose-centric in their thinking. And they have a core metric that they call customer value. And you're probably part of a business right now that has a similar type of metric, which is called customer value. But if we're all honest and we look at ourselves in the mirror, it's a sales target, right? Because basically it's calculated as the number of products and services that a single customer sells. And the goal is to make sure that customer value goes up, which is a nice way of saying they have more products and services of yours. Okay, so in the cold light of day, it's a sales metric with a bit of a classic kind of NPS. Are you satisfied with the service that you received? Okay, nothing wrong again with that, but that's a company-centric way of measuring performance. What we're doing now, and this is a live project, which is why I can't mention the company, is saying, what does it mean to have a core metric that is measuring financial well-being as an outcome for your customers? So do they feel more in control? Are they more joyful? Do they have more resilience? And can we set KPIs around this? What does this metric kind of look like? Because actually, if you allow yourself to think about how you improve resilience, then you can work backwards and design the products and services that deliver on the resilience. Maybe you have those products and services, brilliant, but maybe you don't. And then you have this drive and this energy that's truly purpose-led to go and create those products and services. Or if you can't create those products and services, to partner with people that can. So what you're doing is working from what's the impact we want to achieve, and then working your way back to what's our role in creating that impact. Maybe it's something we can do today. Maybe it's something we need to work towards for tomorrow. Maybe it's a partnership we set up. But then you have purpose baked in. And I think that's the key. When we think about this catchphrase of what does it mean to have purpose baked in rather than the cherry on the cake, it means that you've done this hard decentering work and allowed yourself to not be at the center of the system, but to be a key player within that, and then to figure out how to participate in that most productively, both from an impact perspective, but also from a business perspective. Next slide. So just in summary, 3 kind of quick myths that I think need busting around this place. We often hear, oh, I can't do it. This is the luxury. You know, only people who are family-owned businesses like Mars and people who've already made it can do this because it's a cost center. I can't do it now. This is actually, what's happening is that if you don't think this way and don't function this way, it will catch you up and actually your business will begin to tail off because you haven't gotten ahead of the curve. So this is a way of thinking about what strategy in the future is going to look like, how you're going to drive innovation, and in particular, top-line performance in the future. I think this is not about, I can't do it now because I can't afford it. This is more about you can't afford to not do it now. Next slide. Philanthropy and CSR is good enough. Not only do I think you leave impact on the table, I think you leave business performance on the table if that's your piece. We can continue to show instances of businesses that give themselves fully to this way of thinking, deliver impact and deliver performance. The big if here, because I often get accused of selling the myth of purpose and profit, it's really easy, just crack on. It is not really easy. That is not what I'm saying. You have to give yourself fully to this. And if you're not willing to give yourself fully, I would say stick to philanthropy and CSR. If you want to give yourself fully, then send me a LinkedIn message and we can talk about that. But it's not for the faint of heart. Next slide. Hang on a minute. You know, this sounds like an awful lot of work, Alistair. You just said it's not for the faint of heart. I know, because it isn't, but it doesn't need to feel like a heavy lift. And I think the more that we can be analogous, think analogously to kind of our physical health and so on, is that actually you have to start somewhere. If you want to run a marathon, you don't wake up one day and run a marathon. Okay, you probably download the app that says Couch to Marathon, right? And that app will tell you, you start off with a slow walk, and then you have a rest. And then you try and run for 15 minutes straight, and then you have a rest. Then you try and run for 20 minutes straight, and then you have a week off. And then you run for 5K. So this is what I mean. It's not, you don't decide to do this and you confront a heavy lift. You actually begin to test and learn what you're ready for, what your business is ready for, what your colleagues are ready for. And you advance at what I'd call an experiment by experiment way. You test what you're ready for. Maybe you need another week at 5K. Maybe you need another month at 5K. Take it. And what you'll realize is that maybe you won't be running a marathon in a year, but maybe you'll be running a marathon in 2. And that's perfectly good. So that's what I wanted to share. Hopefully these myths give you encouragement. And that this case study shows that even banks can be part of this movement, or maybe I should say especially banks can be part of this movement. Thank you very much.
Very nice, Alistair. Really interesting. So what we're going to do now is I have some questions for each of the speakers. And again, if you're in the audience and you want to ask a question, just type it in. But let me start with Richard. So one thing that we build this conference, this webinar as, ideas from different continents, and you're based in China, which is, with India, the country with the biggest consumer market in the world. So I wanted to just follow up with some of the things that you said in terms of who are the high potential consumer groups. You mentioned young families, conscious consumers, and health and wellness groups. I wonder if you have any special comments for what's happening to consumers in China. We hear a lot about the young generation being different from the older generation. And did you have any comments about how consumers are changing in China specifically, to add on to what you said? That's question number 1.
Well, in the grossest stereotype type of way, yeah, I mean, the generations are obviously buying very differently. And I would say until the COVID lockdowns came in, what you were seeing was a preference towards unique, great quality service products. And that often lent towards, a boom towards plant-based materials, plant-based foods, imported, different products. But again, it really depends upon the category. I mean, new families will spend for organic baby powder. They will find TVOC free plastics and equipment and all kinds of things for their kid. It really depends upon the consumer and where they're at. I would say that, yeah, we're seeing a rollback right now because the perception that things are more expensive, in a down economy, it doesn't help. But that's also, I think, where the government itself comes in. I mean, a lot of the progress being made here on sustainability, it's not the consumers. It's done by the infrastructure of the country. And, smog reduction, water pollution, high-speed rail, all kinds of ways that just make life a lot easier at the city level. And so for consumers, as long as they're feeling pretty secure and they have healthcare and education and jobs, they're going to spend for what they think is the best quality. And that's true pretty much anywhere that you see. But again, when you're missing some of those things, it gets to wobble. And the things that wobble are the things that don't solve a real problem. They're nice to have. It's a bit of a luxury, but I just can't afford it right now. And that might be true of many objects. But again, I think that right now you're seeing a downturn into many areas. Plant-based has definitely fallen off. And what's also interesting that I find funny is you will see a lot of young consumers talk about how sustainable they are, but then they have everything they eat brought in using plastic bags and paper boxes, for every single meal. And God forbid they actually walk outside to get their own coffee anymore. They really don't always act, if they audit themselves, in a way that they signal their virtues are aligned. But at the same time, they could still be buying a Patagonia sweater vest and saying that they're part of the movement. It's just, everyone's so unique that I feel it's a bit unfair. But in general, when you're solving a real problem and that is a clear value proposition and it can be afforded by the budget, you have a shot at building a community.
Great, and I think your advice was really good about don't lie. This is not the moment. When you do lie, it's easy to be found out and to have that really come back to bite you in a really bad way.
Yeah.
The other aspect I thought that was interesting and wanted to give you a moment to say more about it was the importance of word of mouth and peer to peer. So if you're targeting a group that is your good consumer, how to leverage them? Do you have some advice for companies how to leverage your fans, your internal word of mouth? Because we know that is has been proven to be the most effective in terms of actually building sales, is word of mouth, peer to peer recommendations.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to get out of your office, try not to use firms to help you do this work, and go talk to people. And almost every time that we've done that with our clients, on behalf of our clients, the more time you spend actually understanding the human beings, what they're worried about, what they're trying to solve, and how you can help them, the better off you're going to be. And if you're just trying to compete because you have the more friendly acrylic Lululemon, that's a really tough sell for people. But they think because Ogilvy told them that it just makes a lot of sense. Let's see, uniqueness is in reality very rare in the world. I mean, okay, if you say so. But I mean, you can really prove by product category that people really want to believe they're unique and they will spend differently. And so at the tribal level, at the community level, I think that's where things get really interesting. Is the yoga community is different than the CrossFit community, which is different than the running community, which is different than the bike packing community. They're all different. They all have some level of uniqueness, but ununiquely, they'll all equally spend for things that they value and that solve their problems. And so I think you have to align to that. And in saying that, I don't think that you can sell the intangible as much anymore. I think it's very hard sell right now to say we're a net zero product. We are helping the penguins and the polar bear. Like, you have to more directly connect with things that they're talking about in their communities if you want to be a community-led, supported business. And that's not to say that some products you can't, but by and large, what you see is when people start cleaning the air and buying things, it's for something in their house or in their backyard or in their community.
Nice. That makes sense. Good advice. I'm going to jump over to Max. And my question here was, you were talking about how you use design thinking with your clients, and you had a nice example from T. Laden. But I wanted to give you a moment to say a little bit more about how a company goes about finding the right purpose. I mean, there are so many different purposes you could latch onto. How do you guide them to find the one that makes the most sense for them as a company?
Well, that's fantastic questions. I think Alastair will have a great perspective towards it too. Well, I think you see in design thinking, where it's a human-centered approach, not so much of AI approach, not so much of robotic approach, but it's all back to humans. And as what Richard has highlighted, it's all back to understanding their needs and wants and aspiration. And any companies can put out nice purpose statements just for the sake of having a nice statements, until they start living it out, until they keep that promise. We always say that good brand has a promise. Great brands keep their promise. So with that promise being made, that turns into part of their purpose. You see, as a company, my company be part of, our purpose is designing a future that matters. So by saying so, it's how then through every conversation, through every approach or the next project, we help clients to move their needles in their business operation, aligning to their brand practice towards a future that matters more, not just to themselves, but their stakeholders, their customers, their families, their talents. So it all boils down to having a purpose that is beyond just profit. We always have the sense of, is it profit, just profit impact, or will it deliver people impact as well as planet impact aspect? Yeah, so with all this is learning from the human needs, and we move into imagining the potentials, the possibilities of their tomorrows, and start creating prototype, creating ways to communicate those values and live it out.
Great. And just one more for you, Max, since you're based in KL and we kind of have you representing Southeast Asia, that whole region of the world. Is there anything else that you could tell us in terms of the trends that are going on in Southeast Asia where you're based? Maybe in terms of which type of consumer are actually more active in supporting purpose-driven companies? Is there differences by generation? Is it by region? Or which consumer groups are giving you the most hope and making you feel the most optimistic right now?
Oh, well, you see, when we deal with clients or business leader, their biggest pain points has always been, how do we retain talent? And primarily those Gen Y, Gen Zs, and then the younger emerging generations that workforce in the companies. Because you have to know, the millennials, when they enter the workforce, they are not so much after the paycheck. Well, they can get good salary and they find different avenues of income stream. But what they're really after is about how they be able to create an impact together with their organizations. So if I were to addressing these generations, it's then looking at this generation, they are the world changers. They want to change the world. So as a matter of fact, as I look at what Alistair, early on, there's a graph that presenting when we stand for something, and there's actually people willing to pay more to stand together with you in their consumerism, the entire commercialization. So I think this is the generation where we need to find the way to bridge the gap, whether it's through setting the right purpose, delivering the right values, and always, oftentimes, consider what are the values that we create as a brand or even as a client for themselves that will make greater impacts that matters most.
Okay, thank you. And Alistair, I wanted to ask a kind of related question for you. So you had very interesting case study and took us through the process that you worked with your client, the bank. But I wanted to ask, for companies that are not obviously linked or smoothly linked to a certain social purpose or sustainability, how do you guide them? In that case, is it risky to take on a social purpose? Are there topics that you should avoid? Can it backlash into being accused of greenwashing? Or how do you work with companies that don't have a real natural fit to any certain social purpose or sustainability?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think we all can come up in our heads with a few industries that feel like, oh, purpose isn't for you. You're too far gone. You arms dealers and you oil and gas companies, like, we're going to give up on you. I think I'd have the opposite answer to that and say, no, it's absolutely those kinds of companies that need the greatest amount of support. And I mean, I won't talk about this company, but it's well worth looking up Philip Morris and the work that they've done around purpose. IMD have a great case on them, and how they've used purpose to design what they call a smoke-free future. You kind of have to withhold judgment when you look at these kinds of things, but I'm very impressed with the honesty at which a company like Philip Morris has approached this purpose conversation. And from my own experience, we work with a number of alcohol companies, and again, they're a current client, so can't share who, but it's a live project that I'm in the midst of right now. They have gone for a purpose of creating a greater sense of belonging. So highlighting the negative impacts that they've had on kind of driving isolation and some kinds of aspects of antisocial behavior as a beer company, I think that's been incredibly courageous. It was a really tough conversation to say, shouldn't we just run away from this? Like, shouldn't we just steer clear from that kind of topic? Let's go pick something that's really easy. Let's do something with our breweries and water, because that's the low-hanging fruit. And the answer is, well, absolutely. But every other brewery is doing clean water and zero emissions factories. I would actually say that's the territory now of what's expected of brands. If you're not keeping your territory clean and tidy, you've got an issue. Purpose isn't about the prove kinds of activities. Let's prove to the world that we're less bad than we really are. Okay. It's more, I say purpose is at its home in the improve category. Where can we actually do something that's meaningful, that's distinctive, that's actually can drive difference? And so this work around loneliness, increasing a sense of belonging, was a difficult topic for the brand. But I'd say that there'd be an aspect of, if you don't go for that, you actually leave the door open to the purpose washing, right? But actually owning that kind of topic, saying we have a role to play, and that's why we're thinking about non-alcoholic options and incentives to do what they're calling zebra drinking, which is one alcoholic, one non-alcoholic, one alcoholic, one non-alcoholic, and incentivizing that at a lower cost so that you can still have your 4 beers a night if that's what you're used to, but only 2 of them will be alcoholic. So it's a way of thinking that drives a different type of conversation. And I think that even these kinds of companies that might be, this in the sin categories for different reasons, they have a role to play. They should be encouraged and applauded for tackling the difficult topics that are front and center because of the products that they sell, not accused of being two-faced or whatever the accusation might be. And that actually shying away from them would be more of a mistake than actually confronting them.
Nice advice. And I was so glad you showed the Edelman Trust Barometer. I love showing that in class. I think it's a great way to prove that, consumers want to trust, but they don't. And so if you can fill that gap as a company, you really have something to gain, something concrete to gain. And in this day and age, the only real way to build trust is to address issues head on. Don't run away from them, as you were saying. If there's something obvious, just talk about it and be open about it. And that's a really encouraging development.
Yeah, and I would say that it's opened up some new conversations and partnerships with stakeholders. So if you think of something like loneliness, you think, well, what's the role of technology in driving loneliness? That's a really interesting conversation. And all of a sudden, a beer company talking to a Meta becomes a really obvious thing because, well, you've got a stake in this loneliness issue. We've got a stake in this loneliness issue. And one of the activations that they did, which was a really interesting one during the summer, was they had an old bus and they asked everyone to leave their phones outside of the bus, and you could bring your drink in and you had a conversation, but without your mobile phone. And the whole thing was then to say, well, what did it feel like to not have your phone, to be really present, to be, focused on the conversation and the people in front of you whilst you have your beer, rather than beer in one hand and phone in the other hand. And I think, I'm not saying that that's the end of the journey at all. I'm saying that that's one of those that's the 1K run that you're doing, right? That's not the marathon yet, but let's start there, and let's not start accusing these kinds of companies for not doing enough when they're actually confronting the right topic.
Nice. I love that example, and good example of just forcing companies to take a look at the big issues that are obvious and try some new things. And a lot of good things can come out of that. And it actually goes into one of our questions that we have that just came in, which is for all 3 of the experts, and it's talking about partners. And I think that's a great topic because in many ways, when you're going to create a brand that's purpose-led, it's easier to do if you do it in partnership with an NGO or with a business organization that helps you to address the issue that you want to take on. So the question coming from us on LinkedIn from Richard Shu, What sort of business or creative partner will make you stronger, better, more impactful change maker? How to choose a good partner. Who would like to answer that first? It's a question for all three of you.
Okay, I can take that. And hi, Richard. Richard Susan. Well, hope you're well. I think for me personally, it's in my expertise, and especially in the industry you work with, especially towards the small medium enterprise, and to help them to see the lights of creating the future that matters. Oftentimes, it's rather difficult for them to see that because they are of different focus. It's especially profit is something of the forefront of the focus they should highlight. But the challenge is always at how do we address even on the sustainables, on the planet impact beyond just making the profit impact. So I think it's important to me, I don't have a clear full answer to that, but having a like-minded community like such in the Harvest community, it plays a key role to always be able to find interesting or alignments to how we can create synergies together. Likewise, like today, immediately I can already think of ways I can connect with Richard's, Rebecca's, even Alastair in potentially different ways to highlight certain impacts that we get to do for the clients in our different space. Yeah, that's for my side, my end.
Okay, thank you, Max. Alastair or Richard, Rich, do you have any other comments about how to choose a good partner in order to strengthen a purpose-led drive?
I mean, I've created partnerships with nonprofits, academic and industry associations. I think right now the group that makes me the most energized is definitely the entrepreneur. So the mission-driven entrepreneur platform, and actually less so the brands. The brands themselves, because of net zero and a number of other targets, a lot of them have just lost their ambition to do something really unique or ground changing. They're just kind of, studying to the test, which is let's hit zero by 2050, even though most of us already recognize that we're even well past the 1.5 degrees. So those net zero targets they don't even matter on some level. And so the brands are getting less interesting in reality because they're not solving problems right now. But working with governments and working to help them understand the frameworks they need, the regulations they need to deliver, but also I talk a lot about the economics of water and just helping governments understand, and then industries understand, when you start to see climate patterns change and the rain levels, the rain patterns change, and you start seeing droughts, when those droughts start happening, you start losing your ability to power your energy portfolios, as we saw in southern Sichuan, as we've seen in other parts like Texas and other parts. But you also lose the ability to, with your farm and your food and ag system. So I know Mars is looking a lot at this resilience, and it's like you're starting to see real systemic changes come to governments in advance of a lot of these challenges. And that's where I think ultimately finding ways to partner. What I like to do is entrepreneurs, academics, and government institutions together is a really fun way to say, look, the brands aren't going to keep up. Your laws are way behind. What can entrepreneurs be doing? And how can academic institutions be kind of center of excellence, conveners, innovators? Like, how can we do that at scale? And I think that's where I want to spend more time, Richard, if I'm really honest. And I have a few of those projects coming up, and some of it is just based off of conversations I'm having. And I think at the end of the day, if we're talking about solving real problems, having an organic juice, having a BPA free, that's not solving real problems at the global scale, even if it's solving it for maybe a consumer. And I think for me, I'm more looking at that stuff. But for a brand to succeed, they really need to know the ground. So for me, I'm really looking at a different space, but just taking away those lessons, like you still have to solve a real problem. And it's going to come through what you call multi-stakeholder approach.
Alastair, do you have something else to add to that? I know, you may have quite a little bit different perspective.
Yeah. So I'd say, we have this language, and it relates to what Rich was saying about multi-stakeholders. We have this language around orchestration. And in partnerships, you want orchestrators in the sense that, again, the analogy is if you can imagine an actual orchestra, there's lots of people with different instruments, but there's always one person who's the most important, and that's the conductor. So they don't actually play an instrument, right? They're not the ones with the tuba, they're not the ones with the trumpet or the sax, that's not them. But they have this ability to know when that person ought to come in, what sound they ought to be making. And there's a lot of wisdom in either becoming, if you're in a role to become the kind of that conductor, or even participating as a conductor. Look, we're not the ones that are going to play the instruments and do all the doing, but we are absolutely committed to making sure that we understand what the appropriate role of each stakeholder is, understanding what the right timing is, what's in their skill set, what's not in their skill set, and what we're really looking for. So I'd say one of the big things is the conductor is almost responsible for the final outcome, the combined outcome, and actually hands over responsibility to the individual, players of those instruments. And I think when we talk about complex societal and environmental problems, that analogy is really important because no one person solves those kinds of problems. So it's multi-stakeholder by definition. It's how do we show up in multi-stakeholder environments where it's not about, I'm doing my bit, what are you doing? But actually thinking about how people are orchestrated and coordinated together. And then the last piece would be to also make sure that you have people that are willing to create a bit of tension between the status quo and the future. If the status quo isn't being questioned, you're probably not doing enough. You're not asking hard enough questions. If you don't feel some kind of level of disruption in partnerships, and we've done a lot of research in partnerships, and there's a bit of an irony with corporate, it's particularly, large corporations partnering with large NGOs like your Oxfams, your TechnoServes. You set up a partnership and you have an account manager in Washington, DC, and you're trying to do a project in Indonesia. And then you have this weird, this weird kind of account management relationship. It's like, well, I'm not partnering with you because you've got a snazzy account manager in Washington. I'm partnering with you because you've got domain knowledge in Indonesia. Why am I going through this piece? And it's because the partners don't see corporations. I mean, this is changing, but our experience is often NGOs at the moment don't see corporate partners as thought partners. They see them as a wallet. And that's a massive problem. So I think there are a few watch outs there, but I think if we have this idea of we need a conductor to help orchestrate multi-stakeholder pieces, and we need to accept that unless there's some level of disruption or tension, then we're probably not asking hard enough questions. You've got a good starting point for effective partnerships.
Very nice point. And the time has flown by. We're actually at our desired stopping point of 3:15. With the Hubbers webinar series, we want to keep them short and punchy so that people who come, they know they can grab lots of good information. And yeah, every time will be around 75 minutes like we have been here. So I want to thank our speakers and also urge the audience, if you want to get in touch with any of these three speakers, they're super expert in helping companies to be more purpose-led and to help them reach their goals. So I can personally highly recommend all three of them. And I'd like to invite Benjamin to say a few words as we close and just let everyone know about some upcoming events. I know this is the first in many webinars we'll have on different topics that are SDG focused and promoted by Hubbers. So Ben, you have the floor for the last word. Oh, we don't hear you.
Yeah. Sorry. Let me just finalize it. Okay. So thanks so much for the very big thank you to Richard, to Alastair, to Max. It was very impressive by the level of knowledge we got. I want to give a few highlights of what's going to happen in Hubbers in March and April. We are restarting our communities event in person in a few cities in Asia, in Europe, and in America. So feel free to join if you are around. We will be having also, will be continuing the new series. And thanks again, Laurie, to have joined us. You did a very great moderation job. So we will plan the next one within a couple of months. And we will restart also our Future of Packaging Circular Economy series. And then the big thing that's going to happen is going to the launch of our LEG learning program, Learn, Experiment, Get a Job, where our students and professors will meet to bring more sustainable practice to our users. So thanks again, Laurie, and hope to see you all. You can contact me through LinkedIn. I'm always available, or contact the team. And if you have an idea or you want to speak to our next event, we will be very happy to have you in.
Thanks, everyone. Keep in touch, and we hope to see you at the next Hubbers event. Take care until then, and keep in touch. Goodbye for now.